Hey there, Alan Mathews here. I would like to talk to you about how to decipher classical guitar music so that you can really know what is going on with this piece that you are playing. In classical guitar music, we have a lot of information in one line of music. It's like an entire orchestra sometimes playing at one time, all these different parts going on, but yet we all have it on one staff of music going across the page. And so what I'd like to talk to you about today is how do you actually know which parts are which, and how do you actually use that information to make what you're playing sound much more beautiful. One of the main problems that beginners make is that they see a line of music, they look at it all vertically, they just plow right through it and everything gets the same thing. So you can't necessarily pick out the melody. They might know what the melody is, but as a listener, if you don't know the tune, then you might not be able to pick out the melody. And that's what we really want to be able to do for our listeners, is to really spoon feed it and say, this is the melody, this is the part to be listening to, this is the supporting role. We want to be able to take them on a journey, and to do that, then we need them to feel very safe and very like we want them to feel like they know what's going on somewhat in the music, so that they can actually then open themselves to the experience of listening to the music. And so one of the ways that we can do that is, first off, identify what is what. And for that, we are going to use this little snippet of this Leo Brouwer tune called A Day in November. And so this is just the opening of it. I'll just play it for you really quick. So this is just the opening phrase of A Day in November. We're not going to actually look at that whole snippet, just the very first part of it. And so you might have noticed, you pretty much by listening to that, you know what the melody is. You could probably sing it back to me. This is the melody for the first phrase. And then there's all this other stuff. But how do you know that that other stuff was not the melody and that this was the melody? Is because I know what the melody is, and I actually showed you with my playing. I demonstrated what was what. And so that's what we're talking about doing right here. So let's look at the score. If you'll notice, we have these stems up notes right here. All these are the stem up notes. And then there's also, we have all of these stem down notes as well. And so then there's a lot of different things going on here, right? So the question is, what's what and why? There's also there's a whole or a dotted half note right here, and then an eighth note and another half, this rest right here. Like, what is all this stuff? This is what we're going to talk about right now. So instead of just plowing through straight and just playing dun 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 dun, then what we're going to do is we're going to look at each part individually and see what is going on. To begin with, let's just look at the stems up notes. And so these are these notes right here. So this is the very top melody that goes on. And if you'll notice, we are in 3/4 time. And what that means is that we'll have 3 beats in every measure. And so then what you're going to find is that the melody adds up to 3. This note is a quarter plus a quarter plus a quarter. This adds up to 3 right here. Now, you're going to find this in every single one, is that each part, the melody, the bass part, the bottom, and the interior voices, oftentimes the harmony, then you're going to find that they typically each will add up to the total number that you have for the time signature. In this case, it's 3, it's a waltz. And so you're going to find that that's the case. If you'll notice, there's something else going on here. And that is that you have on these notes right here, what you have is 2 notes. You have a stacked notes, right? Well, the top note is the melody, and the note below that is not the melody. And so you want to make sure then that you're hearing the melody note and not the chord. And this is something that beginners have a little bit of a hard time with, but there's another article, I'll link to it, on balancing chords, and that's what you have to do. Basically, in a nutshell, you take it and you poke out whatever finger it is that you need to sound louder, and then if you're using your good fundamentals and you're closing your hand when you play, then that note will just come out louder. So to begin with, that one's pretty straightforward because there's such a big range between the bass note and the melody note. And then you have this chord. If you play this too heavily with both of them, it ends up sounding like this. Sorry. It sounds like a chord. Too much bass. Because it's a repeated note, we can kind of fake it because you've already been listening to it and you know that that continues to be the melody. But oftentimes that's not the case. And if there's not that, then it could easily blur the line between that. So ideally, you bring out that note so that the top note is louder to make the melody still be what we're actually listening to. So you really want to beat people over the head with the melody. This is the melody. Don't leave it to chance. Don't leave it to you assume that they'll get it, because they won't. Exaggerate, put the melody way up on top, which brings us to this point of three-dimensional sound and having different layers of sounds. We have, ideally, at all times, 3 different layers of sound, and that's one up front, one less far, a little bit further back, supporting the front, and then something else is kind of in the background a little bit. It's just adding some color, some texture to the mix, some harmony. And so the melody is generally what's going to be way up front. So you put the melody absolutely loudest. Second becomes the bass, because that really gives us the harmonic progression, and that tells us what we're going. And also oftentimes put some counterpoint. That's like a line that runs at the same time, but it's not the melody, but it moves apart from the melody and just it makes it more interesting. That's a terrible description of counterpoint, but you can look it up. So you have the melody on top, the bass is the second loudest, and then the interior voices, the other stuff that goes on, that's the very quietest. And that's the stuff that can sometimes get you into trouble, because sometimes it gets very close to the melody. In range, it can get very close. Just like this note right here, it's only a third away. It's from an A to a C. And so it's not very far away. It's a minor third. And so if you play this too loud, it can really clash, or it can muddy the waters between the parts. It's like the backup singer who starts singing too loud. It's like you have the diva up front. That's who we want people to keep their eye on. The backup band is there to support her or him. So this is what we're doing with the balancing. Ideally, 3 layers of sound at all times. But to do that, you have to know what those layers are, and then you have to actually be able to play them separately, be able to know what they are. Otherwise, oftentimes you just don't know. You think you know, but then at that one little spot, it just goes and you don't know, and it just becomes confusing to the listener, oftentimes because it's confusing to you, and you might not even realize that it's confusing to you. Our next group over here, which is the bass, and this is the bass. So if you'll notice, all of these also add up to 3 beats. So we're still in 3/4, and these are all dotted half notes, which get 3 beats. And so here we are also adding up to 3 beats. We'll just play this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This is these 4 bars of the bass line, right? Well, it might seem that that's too simplistic to spend your time on, but if you don't know it, then you just don't know it. So in your practice, it's worthwhile just to do that and just to listen to it. Sometimes you'll have more advanced bass lines than that, and so it'll become more obvious. But even on these long notes, then still, how do you want this to play? If we use our dynamic rules, and you can, my rules on dynamics, which are not mine necessarily, and they're not the only rules, but they seem to work, is that when lines are going down, then they get louder. When they're going up, they get quieter. So for this one, we would start just however we start, and then we would get louder because we're going down, and we would get louder as we're going down, and then we're going to get softer as we come back up. And then that would be the way that we phrase this line. And so then we can just do just that, really listen into the connection of the notes. In other words, not big gaps. Oh, it breaks my heart to hear that kind of playing. So really listening to the connection of just those. You could spend a long time on just these 4 notes right here. And yes, it seems simple at first, but if you really want to get it just so, then you could really spend your time and get that one line as beautiful as you could possibly get it. Same with the treble line. We talked in another post about note pairs, and this opening beginning, I'm just going to take a minute and talk about this. This opening line right here would be one such place right here. So so with the melody line, you can just really nitpick and get everything just like you want it. So with the note pairs that we were talking about in a different post, I'll link to it below. If I remember to link all these below, then we just play the first one, one for nothing, and then bigger on the second, and then because we're going up, we're going to back off on the C. So A, B, C, or off, and here, and here, and to here. Here it is, and to, or off, and here. There it is, off, and here. This is a great demonstration of the note pairs from a couple of weeks ago. You can dive through the archives and find note pairs if you'd like to. Complete tangent right there. I'm guilty of the tangent. Getting back to this, let's take a look at the interior line. And this interior line right here is really two lines, but they cheated a little bit on the second beat and just kind of blended it in with the top because they didn't want to make it into a whole fourth line. But if you'll notice, what adds up to the total number of beats in the measure are the stems down, the eighth rest. So we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. And that time they did actually put the stem down, interestingly. On this one right here, they put the stem down, whereas on this one and this one, they put the stem up. Other than that, it's the same. So again, fuzziness, and you'll see this in music, so I'm glad that I actually have these weirdnesses in here, because you can see that sometimes with the interior voice stuff, it comes, it goes, you can flesh it out, you're kind of fleshing out the harmony where you see fit with it, or where the composer saw fit with it. But if we look at this, most people never actually play this interior line, which is this rest right here, or this is what this in blue, I'm not going to remark everything, it's what's in blue right here. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2, 3, 1. That's your interior line. And so you could bring your rules to bear on that, which is, if our rule on dynamics, if you have a repeating note, then start it quieter and crescendo it. And so you could definitely do that with this one. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2. There's all kind of little things. So you could actually really trick out just that interior line all by itself. And when you go back and play it all together, it won't be as perfect as you make it separately, but it will be better. And you'll be more cognizant of it. You'll be more aware of it. You can actually start to hear it a little bit. Once you play it by itself, you'll actually notice it. And oftentimes, there's stuff in our music that we don't even notice at all until we actually play it separately, or we go into our lesson and we talk to our teacher, and they're just like, well, what about that stuff? And well, I don't even know. I've never even listened to that, and I've been playing it forever. And that's one of the benefits of having a teacher, or it's the benefit of actually picking it apart on your own if you don't have a teacher, or even if you do. You can blow their socks off by being able to understand your music better, by picking the melody from the bass and the interior voices and being able to actually play them separately. If you're going to memorize a piece, if you go through and actually memorize it in this way, it's harder. I'll say it straight up. It'll take a little bit longer on the front side, but to actually memorize the lines separately and put them back together and memorize them together, it's hard, but you will have that piece memorized in a very serious way, and you'll be able to play it much more beautifully because you'll know each part and you'll have spent time with each part separately. So at the very least, there's what to take away from this. At the very least, find out what your melody is. First and foremost, bring that out. So in this case, That's your melody. Make sure that your listeners can hear the melody and know what's on top. Everything else, get it down. Yes, this makes everything you play much more difficult because it's much easier just to go. But it's not pretty. It's just a big ugly piece at that kind. It's kind of Neanderthal and just heavy-footed. So instead of doing that, bring that melody out, make it beautiful, bring everything else in the background. If you spend your time on things like this, you'll have a much better practice time because it's harder, it's more challenging, and you're actually then rewarded with beautiful music at the end. And you'll really find that that builds these type of demands on your music. They build technique. Your ability to play well is based on your ability to do this kind of stuff, these little nuance things. There was a guy I know, he was the violinist of our local orchestra for many years, decades ago, and he just died. He was in his 90s, but he played his violin. He was a concertmaster of the Portland Symphony. He played his violin up till 2 weeks before he died. And his chops were completely gone. He couldn't play fast or anything like that, but his musicality was still there. And that's this kind of stuff. His nuance was there. You could hear that he was a master musician, even though his fingers didn't work anymore. And that's why it should be really promising for you, if you are still on the beginning spectrum, to really embrace this way of working, is that without building the super technical skills to go crazy fast and everything, which takes a long time, you can still play really beautifully if you can pay attention to the melody and if you can bring that out. If you have these other technical skills, yes, it's hard. Yes, it takes time, but it's the good work. And it'll have you sounding much more beautiful on the easier pieces. You don't have to wait until you're playing really hard pieces. You can work on, if you do this kind of stuff, if you know what the melody is and you can actually bring that out, if you can know what the roles of the middle voice and the bass and everything else are, then you can bring these out in your playing and you can sound beautiful even if you're playing in the preparatory book or in the level 1 book or something. If you work in this way, you can actually jump far ahead in the beauty of what you're playing, and it's much more rewarding for you and for the people that are listening. So I hope that that is informative to you in some way, how to pick the parts apart in music. Enjoy your day. Please subscribe to this channel. Please go over to Classical Guitar Shed and sign up there for articles and videos like this and all kind of other free resources and courses. I look forward to seeing you in the near future. Take care.